I'm gonna I'm gonna apologize straight up beforehand again. I think the noise canceling's on because they are still drilling all around here. And I'm also gonna try not to be awkward because I feel like I'm still figuring out what this is that we're doing here, and I still know I want to do it for years. I bought these Yeti mics like during COVID because I thought that's something I was supposed to do to make this. And then the last year they started making these cordless mics, and so I'm still figuring a lot of this stuff out. But today's episode 2 of Consider This, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about kind of keeping the dream alive as you get older. Man, I gotta be honest, I'm so self-conscious about this. It's like a scrunch mark right here I'm getting. I think it's from squinting because I need glasses, but I don't wear them. When I'm reading things off the screen, people literally say to me, are you okay? Like, because I think I look angry. But I'm like, no, I'm just trying to read. But I'm really trying to stop doing that because I feel like a lot of the time when I see people, I'm like, I don't want that on my face when I get older. I feel like a lot of the time I'm just like constantly thinking about things that most people don't think about. It drives me kind of crazy. I can't just like be. It kind of ties into this stream of thought thing that we've been doing since the first episode. And by the way, I think I made my first episode a few days ago, and I realized that I think there was one viewer, and it was me when I accidentally clicked on it. I'm going to keep making these because I'm figuring out how to do this. But I know I want to share with you guys out there because, I mean, I live a pretty solitary life on my own. I wish, sometimes the content that I've received, or even those big shows that you guys will watch, or some of the smaller ones, it's been like it helped me to feel like I wasn't going crazy, especially during COVID when I had certain thoughts that maybe were unpopular in Southern California. Um, and sometimes just hearing a voice that's received by many people that is out there that mirrors my voice, it just like I can keep going on my own if I know that it's not just me. And I do want to share because I do think a lot about these things. And I have my own way of doing it, but I feel like maybe it's not just my way. Maybe there's other people out there too. I guess I'm trying to look for people who hear me. And I guess I've consumed so much, I've listened to so much, I feel like it's my time to put something out there. There's no monetization for me. I'm not making any money off this. I don't think anyone's even seeing this. But this kind of ties into today's episode, which is keeping the dream alive. I just want to talk a little bit about keeping the dream alive. I guess I've always been a little bit more on the dreaming side than the reality side. I had trouble in kindergarten. I think I was kicked out of one school in nursery for throwing rocks or something. And then the next school held me back in kindergarten. I think I bit a kid. And then I got suspended in 4th grade for some behavior stuff. And then, by the time 7th and 8th grade came around, I was already kind of doing like a little bit of the wayward high school thing, junior high school thing, and just not caring. Like I didn't need to make trouble anymore. I could just kind of, smoke pot and not care too much. And that came along with not caring about work either. I was sent to this New York City private school on the Upper East Side that was just really overachieving. And even though I excelled in the arts and was really good at some of that stuff, the school didn't really care much about that. There was nothing for me. There was no track for me. And came 10th grade, I was kicked out. I was handing in all my tests blank. And I was doing that because it was my survival instinct. I felt like I was stupid compared to everyone around me. Like I knew I wasn't, but I was failing. By metrics, I was failing compared to my classmates. And I just kind of refused to submit to their grading system. I just handed all my tests in blank. And I remember this. I remember my mom telling me this or something, that when the administration told her I couldn't go there anymore, she said, yeah, they just said We really like him, but we don't know what to do with him. And like, it was scary because like here I am, this 10th grader in the 90s, mid 90s. Nobody cared about you in the early 90s, mid 90s. If you didn't do well in school, it was like now we know everyone does well in school, but I went to a school you had to do well. And if I didn't do well, I was a blemish, a tarnish on their reputation. There's no care. You're gone. And then I went to the next school, and that was like a religious school, and that principal wouldn't have me for half a year. I used to hang out with the special ed kids and like chill, and I think that was like scary to him or weird. But I was always an artist and just about people who were just different like me. I think all of us are different. I think most of us conform to societal standards and norms and just learn that box early on. I just couldn't fit into it. And then, I had my journeys, but the dreaming really never stopped. And for me, the dreaming was, I'm going to do things. I'm going to figure this out. I want to figure this out. Like, I can't be unhappy. I can do hard. I can struggle, but I can't sign up for and willingly shackle myself or like spade myself or neuter myself. Like I can't do that. I'll die trying. And I mean, that just continued on. 42 now, and I'm still doing it. I finished like a degree 2 years ago. I was like, finally, during COVID, I was working in a supermarket, and I was like, this is a nightmare. I was like, I've seen things in people I can't unsee at this point. I'm sorry if like I seem distracted. I'm getting used to looking at you guys, and there's like palm trees and a window right there for the light, but I was just like, that was a weird time because before that vaccine thing came around, whether you got it or not, irrelevant. Like I was expendable. I was an essential worker, which means like expendable, and people were like fighting over rice and waiting around the block and like breathing on me all day. And like, I was only scared for like a week or two. And then after that, I was like, I can't afford to be scared. I don't have any money. Like I got to come to work. I either have to not care or be too scared to come to work. So I can't care. I don't have the luxury of caring. But then I'm like supposed to also care like for other people. And then like, I'm essential. It just means like you can die first. So I was like, let me take this degree and finally believe in myself. And I took it and I've been doing that for a little bit, but here I am again. And, in my life, I've had some really great bosses, but I've had some really horrible bosses. And sometimes you have someone who you work under and they just crush souls. Like that's their management style, soul crusher. And I think it's largely in part because a lot of people I hate this word, but I think it applies to these people. So I'm going to use it. And I think people are triggered by people who are not like broken, like a horse is broken to be controlled. Like, I think people are triggered by people who have a semblance of like a degree of self-confidence. I should tone it down. I just sound like angry and upset and obnoxious, but because I'm not. I mean, I am sometimes. But I'm trying to reduce those times, and I'm remaining, I'm surviving, I'm succeeding, I'm thriving and not being broken. Like I'm still doing well at my age. And I see people driving those Porsches and I want it, and I see people making rent easily every month and I want that. And, there's other things I want too. But when I look at them and I say, well, if I could have that, but I had to be them, I don't want it. And that's like, I think that's a really important reminder for me. And it is like my salvation is saying like, I want those things, but I don't want to be the people who wield those things. And if they are the product of what they had to do to wield those things, then I want to walk my road still. And I mean, I guess that's keeping the dream alive, you know? Man, I had to give notice on a job, like a few weeks ago, just because I was being spoken to in some kind of way. And I looked at this person across the room from me in my mind. They weren't there at the moment. They've been there 17 years. And in my seat, in the last 10 years, I was the fifth person. And many people, I'm talking dozens of people who've been in and out of that room, have told me things that confirmed that all those people were sent packing. They just couldn't weather this other person. And my supervisor is someone who used to sit in my seat. So they are like they're in the camp with that other person. I just don't I'm very respectful, but I also insist on being respected to a modest degree, like bare minimum. But some people they're soul crushers. They're dream crushers. They won't respect you. What do you do? I mean, for me, I often will regret it for a short time after and fight it and almost like do an injustice to my decision, which was often in the moment, but after many moments beforehand where I suppressed that desire. And in this case, it's like, I'm moving on. Like, it wasn't like a short notice, like I'm seeing through my year contract, but that job would have broken me had I stayed there indefinitely because of fear of leaving. And sometimes it's like, I've said this before, and I think there's probably a more eloquent and better way of saying it. I'm like feeling that, like, I'm really trying hard. But there's no flight for the fearful. If a fledgling's too afraid to leave the nest, it can't fly. And any time in life where I took that chance, where I did that thing without fear and with great intentions and with all the ethic and need, like practical things that I needed to do and serve and wake up for every day, it was always better than before. Our dreams, I mean, maybe that's not even the right word for it. Maybe it's intentionality. Maybe it's not accepting the unacceptable. Maybe it's hoping for better and I'm not, but doing it, allowing our impulses and our judgments and everything to come to fruition in some of those moments and to do that thing. It's like training. If you train in Kung Fu or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai or trail running, or you'd spend tons of time training, or even military service and special forces, so that in that moment, I mean, it's gotta be a reaction. And I mean, there's so much time for regret and like reconsideration in life when it comes to professional career, family choices, moving on in relationships sometimes. But, whether you're religious and monotheistic in your faith and theology, or you're, atheistic, or you just like are Wiccan, or your nature calls you, I mean, at a certain point, we get this form but once. I think all of those things say that. And I mean, you get to spend your time. And it can be taken from you on an instant. The ceiling could crumble right now. My motorcycle could go down tomorrow. I could get bit by a rattlesnake, which I skip over half a dozen to a dozen times a season here in Southern California. But I'm not going to stop running. And I don't have insurance for that $150,000 airlift anti-venom treatment. But it keeps me well. So if I'm too afraid to do it because I can't afford to pay for it when it happens, I'll start to degrade. All this stuff, like, it sounds like it's a tangent, but it's the tangent of like, it reminds me of that scene in the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, where he's doing the leap from the lion's head. It's like right after, like, he's got to spell the name, by stepping on the tiles, but it's like a J, not a Y. And then he gets onto the next thing, and it's this empty space, a gap in this huge drop in this like cave. And it's way too far to run, jump, or even parkour across. And he's got to take the leap from the lion's head. And that's like where he just steps forward, because there is no back, you know, there is no back. There's only forward. And if the planning in our frameworks of logic and what we can understand, what's in our immediate sight, doesn't make for our forward trajectory, that you can't stand still. And that kind of ties in with like another idea that I have. And you'll have to pardon me for just going on this tangent, but I'm doing this alone, you know, and I've got to give a shout out to Theo Vaughn. I mean, I don't watch his podcast that much, but I've seen it and I like it. And when he has a good guest, I watch it. But no, like I don't watch any podcasts lately too regularly. But he's one of the few people who I see that kind of just have this kind of one thing. And that's how my mind always worked. And when I saw him doing it, I was like, oh, like I can do that, I guess. I guess I'm allowed to do that. And that's like, I'm not proud to say it like that because it doesn't sound really brave, you know, but he gave me, I guess, a little bit of a wind behind my wings, or like a backwind, tailwind. And I guess what I was going to say is I was reminded of something, and it's such a valid thing that I wanted to say. Indiana Jones, leap from the lion's head. Well, anyway, I feel like, yeah, it's like, it's tough. Like keeping the dream alive is tough as you get older. And I mean, we're all getting older, you know, like a 60-year-old's getting older, a 42-year-old's getting older, a 20-year-old's getting older. And honestly, it's only like a little less scary now, even though there's more on the line. Just because there were a lot of times where I paid a price to keep the dream alive and I succeeded. So I know tomorrow is going to come. But I just feel like it's important. It's the most important thing. Because one of my biggest kind of like self-grinding tooth complaints is like the people around me just these days seem so uninspired. And I mean, I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this. No, I'm not, because I don't really hang out with anyone. And I'm kind of talking to everyone outside of this area because I feel so isolated here. But I came here 10 or 11 years ago for family reasons, and I'm in Southern California. And here, I've never been in a place, and it was upon arrival, because I was going to give credit and say maybe just the whole world's gone that way. And from what I hear, it has in a lot of ways. So I was trying to give like benefit of the doubt. But when I got here, I was like, man, I moved to downtown LA. My first 6 years, I lived in like, for the most part, Topanga, Canyon, and Calabasas area, and like worked in there just so I'd never have to leave. And like, you know, aside from some of the actors and musicians who came in who just, you know, had that sparkle that a lot of my friends who are not those things, who are artists, just other artists, but not known, have. A charisma, that kind of uncompromising grit and gusto. And I was like, oh, I know that. You seem like, you know, me. And I would hang out with those people when they'd come into this little shop I worked in the Canyon. And some of them became friends. But aside from those people, everyone else just seemed like wannabes. Like they just seemed like they were trying to emulate this thing or copy this thing that it is, or most of them not even trying, to have your own uncompromising message and stylistic approach towards living or creating. Which, I mean, every day we walk around, we decide how we want to dress. We decide how we want to walk, whether we're interested in posture, our breath, this crease line, you know, advancing ourselves. And it's just, I just wish there were more inspiring people around. Because when I was living in Brooklyn, and I was living in Bushwick from like 04 to 14 on the McKibben Street lofts, shout out, which I think blew up, you know, Bushwick. I used to walk 10 blocks west to Williamsburg and people didn't know where Bushwick was. And we used to have like I mean, those buildings were crazy. They were half occupied. There was crazy stuff going down in them in '04, '05, '06. And it was just inspirational. Like people were inspirational. Like people were working in service industry jobs and they were doing it. And I don't know, I just feel like these days it's hard to find people who are uncompromising in core tenets of being and walking right. And I don't need to be around people who have money or people who have celebrity or people who have status. I need to be around people. I want to be around people who are great, who have awe, who are awesome. And there's so few around. I mean, there are around, I'm not going to be like, I'm not being negative. I'm being real. Like I just told you, there's places I've been where there was a plethora, there was an abundance. So, I mean, that's not negativity. I mean, how could it be if I experienced it? Even the way I'm talking now, it's like a result. It's like this angst of years of living in a place where I feel like I've been gaslit because everyone here is like, they own it. It's like the only place I've ever been. If this isn't great, then what is? Like, if this isn't great, then what am I doing here? But I can't leave. It's too expensive. I don't have the money. It's 1,500 miles of desert east before I get anywhere with a tree. And it's like Flagstaff and Phoenix, I guess, is a 7-8 hour drive from here east. And it's like, it's hard for me. The hardest part of keeping the dream alive here is being around so many people who seem to be living a nightmare. And not even by my judgment, by their own manifestations, expressions, tone, discussions, and, complaints. And still, this is the second podcast. No one watched my first one, but this was a dream of mine since like 4 years ago. I'm doing this on a 3-year-old Google Pixel 7 with $100 cordless mic, and I paid for them. Like I'm not being sponsored. It's in case you want to use it. It's I don't even know what it's called. It's got an interesting name, something Mark II. It's not Honeywell. Those are the heat errors and fans. But I guess this is keeping the dream alive, And I made myself a promise when I had to move here 11 years ago for my son. I haven't seen my family in 11 years. I've got 8 brothers and sisters. He's never met them. My relationship with my son, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's more of a struggle, and I don't have anyone to talk to about it. But I made myself a promise, and I said, when I leave this place, I got here at 30, I'm 42 now. When he's done with high school, I'm gone unless there's something to keep me here. I said, when I leave this place in 18 years, when I first got here, I said that. I said, I am going to be in a position to thrive and enjoy the rest of my life. Which meant I had to keep myself physically well. I couldn't become an alcoholic like most of the people out here. I couldn't have to own this place because it's all I have and make myself unable to leave. I would never utter the expression, but how could I leave this weather? It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. It's like the only people here who don't want to experience 4 seasons have never experienced 4 seasons. I'm like, have you ever lived anywhere for more than a year other than here? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, then how could you say you could never leave? You couldn't leave the weather. It's like an unwillingness. And that ties into the fact that I think what breeds intolerance is a lack of exposure to diverse experiences, like a true 4 seasons. I've experienced 4 seasons, and I didn't even know how to feel about them until I moved here. I ended up traveling to tropical places like Vietnam and Costa Rica and stuff, and I enjoyed that in my 20s. But after spending time out here now, 12 years, and I running is a huge part of my life, especially in the mountains. And honestly, I've never missed a full 4 seasons as much as this. I've never wanted it as much as this. I want diversity of experience. Because you know what's not cold? 49 degrees when you're used to 30. You know what is cold? 55, when all you know is 60 to 75. And that's like Ventura where I live, which is great. But I mean, what is great? I mean, if it yields people who are intolerant of much range and experience, and that's what the people I have to be around, that's not so great. That's a huge side effect. And I'd rather have spring, fall, and a little bit of winter, because honestly, they're not bad. And I get to be around tolerant people. That's my dream. Like a true tolerance, not like the flag word tolerance or the virtue signal tolerance. People who actually have a threshold and a tolerance in accordance with the engineering definition, like the tolerances between the piston rings and the cylinder walls, accommodating for the heat up and the expansion and the weight of the oil, the distance, the floating space between, so it can tolerate increasing in size. Tolerance allows for change. These are my dreams. They're modest dreams. I want to live in a place I can afford, which we haven't even spoken about. Well, maybe we'll save that for another time. I want to experience some change in seasons. I want to be able to leave this place and be around family. I want to be able to pay rent, and I want to work for someone who's not a tyrant. Modest dreams. And I think that's also a key factor in what our dreams, what we should select and work towards as our dreams. Make them super obtainable, super realistic. Those are realistic things. I could literally leave this place when I am okay with that, and my son is finished with high school. And I can have those things pretty much as soon as I leave. Dream modest dreams, and you'll always live a dream. I believe that. Anyway, episode 2, keeping the dream alive. I'm still doing it, still working towards it. Hopefully I'll get 1 viewer aside from myself on this episode. Hopefully the mic was on. Hopefully my frame was in. Apologize for the backdrop or the camera quality or the zoom. Hopefully my head is not cut off. I tried real hard to frame it up for a few minutes, but at a certain point you got to get it done. Don't forget to subscribe, like. I guess I don't know much about it. I have a lot to learn, but from what I understand, getting more of those numbers is what will help me get to a place where I could put a little bit of money into like some sound, some sound stuff, like some blankets for the walls or like maybe a light. All right. Keep the dream alive, guys. Appreciate you.